911, what is your emergency?
Units respond code 3 to a 1050 on the highway. Vehicles are blocking multiple
We're en route
lanes
to the
of travel.
hospital. Patient is currently having
We've got a
cardiac
4-alarm
arrest and has
fire
been
here.
intubated.
Send additional
Protesters are
trucks.
outside of City Hall, and they are not complying with our
Out
orders
on 1,
to
hold the
disperse.
air.
In a rapidly changing world for first responders where it seems that every day the rules and norms are changing, there is one voice you can count on to give you the latest in emergency news. That is Lifeline. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lifeline 911 podcast with your host, Erica.
Hello.
I am your co-host, Gary, and today we are going to be discussing the basics of training, how to teach someone else to do the job. This is a topic that is, pretty near and dear to both Erica and I's hearts, as we've spent a good portion of our career in training, and we kind of wanted to just bring the topic up in order to discuss it and hopefully give those of y'all who listen a bit of tools in order to be as successful as possible.
Yes, agreed.
So, Erica, when we talk about training and like the basics of training, it's a completely different skill set to teach someone else something as it is opposed to knowing how to do it well on their own. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree with that. It is, I call it double duty, usually when I'm talking to other CTOs about what it is to train someone or to be a CTO. You are doing the job, but you're also showing someone else, or I really prefer the word teaching versus training, but that's a whole other episode because I could talk about that on its own. But for the purpose of this conversation, I'll stick with training, but I may not, I can't make that promise, but I think that it is easier said than done to work either on a channel or, matter of fact, for anything, really. It doesn't even have to be our industry. To be able to do the work in real time as you're teaching someone else how to do it or showing someone else how to do it and getting to understanding so that you end up with someone who is at least an equal colleague, maybe not equal in level of expertise, but it's someone that can hold their own. It's easier said than done.
Yes, absolutely. And I think oftentimes what happens is we'll find someone who's, like a gold star police dispatcher or call taker or what have you, and say like, this person really knows their job very well. They're doing a great job. They have, a good attitude. And then we'll peg that person to do training because we're like, hey, we want you to make little copies of you because you're awesome, and keep that, tradition and that chain of excellence alive in a call center.
Yep.
And so we'll say, okay, now you're training Joe. And then when you get to training, you have no tools in your toolbox because it's a wholly different skill set than it is to do the job as opposed to train to do the job.
Absolutely. And I've, as a CTO myself, through the years, had to learn how to do that, how to take the knowledge and the expertise that I have and transfer it to someone else. And I don't even as I'm saying it, I'm not sure the word transfers is really right, but that's where my head was. I figured I would just be able to have them sit down, watch me, do what I do, say what I say, and if we do it enough times, surely you'll pick it up. And when you don't pick it up, I'm confused as to why you haven't picked it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
so,
go ahead.
and so like you've got a challenge there of trying to figure out like why the trainee isn't sort of being molded into a carbon copy of the trainer, because you're thinking like, okay, I'm going to show them what I do and they'll just be able to do it, but a lot of times that's not how that works out, correct?
1000% correct. Because I didn't know, and I'll use myself as an example in this because, you know, as most people who have been listening know, I've been doing this a really long time, 20 plus years, coming up on 23, 4, something like that. And vast majority of that time, I have been a CTO. And so I did not know how to begin to train. And I think as I talk to other colleagues who are CTOs, they are, especially in the beginning, they are struggling with where to start. And I myself didn't know where to start. I didn't know that you have to begin with, I don't know, explanation. You have to explain a task, right? And then break it down to the studs and then break it down even further into little bite-sized pieces where they can process this task or set of tasks that you've given them into step 1, step 2, step 3, and so on until they get it. And then, but that's not just 1, 2, 3, then they get it. That's 1 through, I don't know, 50 repetitions.
Yeah, and I
So,
think one of the issues that one of the things that makes it really tough to train in our industry is that when you're like doing a really good job and being a stellar, dispatcher or call taker, there are so many steps that you're doing and so many actions you're taking that you're not even thinking about or realizing that when trying to explain it to somebody else and get them to do it, you're telling them, okay, just do this and this, but you're cutting out, or your mind is not even realizing that it's not just step A to B. There's 45 different steps that you're doing between there to make B become possible. And
absolutely.
giving that information to the trainee is really important.
Yes. And over time, I began to realize, and I don't even know where I got this from, probably just, spending time with other CTOs that were more seasoned than myself and just time and, trial and error. It occurred to me at some point, wait a minute, I have to adjust my expectation. I have to look at the job of training someone more like teaching someone. So what do you do when you teach someone? You explain to them not just the task, but you give them the why. You give them, we do this step because, and if we don't do this step, this is what happens. Or when we do this step, this happens. And especially adult learners, they absolutely need to know why we do what we do and what each step contributes to the process and or the final product. They absolutely have to have that. Without it, there's no understanding. And without understanding,
Mm-hmm.
you can't get the task done.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. So, what I guess would you say to somebody who's maybe just recently, or maybe has already been a trainer for a long period of time? What would you say are some good and fundamental things that they could look at either in themselves or how they do their training to kind of get a good bearing for, you know, and setting themselves up for success in training the next generation?
I think if I were to have like the perfect conversation, it would sound something like, one, what is your expectation? In your mind, what does it look like to have a person go from they just sat down or they were just introduced to you and you guys are beginning this journey as trainee and trainer? What do you hope to get from it? What is your time frame? So I think, or actually, you know what? Back that up. I would say begin with the time frame that you have. So let's use for example, if it takes about 3 months for us at our agency to build a call taker from
Mm-hmm.
front door to released from training and working on their own, I would say about 3 months. with a month of
Yeah,
that
I'd
being in the
agree.
classroom. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah.
So I would say, all right, they've done the foundation in the classroom or academy, because I've heard it called academies before, and now they are on the floor for OJT. Familiarize yourself with what the time frame is, and then you have to figure out or decide, along with your training leadership, what are the expectations along each benchmark. And actually, even as I say that, I think you have to take the time frame and break it down to benchmarks. So if OJT is 2 months, what does week one look like? Because you have to adjust your expectation. You can't go from day one of OJT looking down the line to the last day of OJT and forget that there are benchmarks along the way. And by benchmark, I mean levels of learning. Week one, what does that
Hmm.
look like? They can't, they can't do what you do at week one. They can do is sit down and recognize where all the keys are.
I would hope so.
You know, they're looking at the keyboard going, okay, this is all right. And I got the screen, and I know that the first order of business is the greeting. I got the greeting down.
Mhm.
I can say the greeting. Austin 911, do you need police, fire, EMS, or mental health services? Yes, week one. You know, and the order of the call being entered into the screen. You got the address, and then you tab over to here, and then you tab over to here, and don't forget this. And your interviewing skills, the introduction to interviewing people, because that's what you're doing when you're taking calls. You are doing the
Mhm.
initial interview. So I think breaking down the role first couple of 3 days of week one. Yes, I'm not saying they don't touch the keyboard. I'm not saying that they don't even take a call, but I think you have to get those things out of the way, and then you have to put them through their paces with that, all the while knowing that during week one, we're not going to have a rock star. If you get one, awesome, but don't go in with that expectation.
Right. Yeah. And I think that what you said is so, critical and important about the benchmarks because you want to, I think, set learning goals for each, we'll call it portion or phase of training.
Hmm.
So, when an employee first starts, you're going to have generally a classroom section in which the employee will learn how to log into the computers, learn about their timesheets, learn about, general policies, all of that kind of stuff is handled in classroom. And they'll also, include, okay, these are the title codes or the problem codes that we're going to use. So the trainee kind of is familiar with those. And then, so when you come to the floor, generally, you should have an idea of like, you know, how to do your timesheets and what the general idea behind each of the problem codes is, and then it becomes incumbent on the job trainer to actually teach how to do the job. So
Hmm.
setting those benchmarks, as you said, I think give good goalposts for each portion of their training.
Yeah. And it is also, it helps the CTO also to know how they're going to put the person through their paces and appropriate for where they are. Because, I'm just thinking, how we talk about age appropriate learning for children,
Hmm.
right? You wouldn't teach a first grader algebra. What do they learn? They learn basic arithmetic. And what happens through school is they up the ante in their learning based on what they have already learned, what they're already familiar with, and they build on that. And I think for me, for a long time, I didn't understand that training someone was not just benchmarks, because I didn't even know what benchmarking was at the time, but it's layers. You start with your foundation, your base foundation, and then you start to build on that. In order to build on that, you don't go from the first week of just introductions to expecting them to be able to perform at a final week. And so you have to dial back your expectation and you have to begin to apply what you know in layers.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that sort of the introduction phase is really important for the trainer trainee relationship because you want to, as the trainer, you're going to want to establish quickly that you should be a person that they can trust.
Hmm.
They should feel like you have their best interests at heart.
Hmm.
Not that you're going to let them skate or pass them, but that you want them to succeed in learning. And it also is an opportunity for the trainer to understand the learning style of the trainee. So, do you need to kind of, be told what to do, and then you can do it, or are you more of a kinesthetic learner and you need to actually, touch the keys to
Hmm.
make that really stick in your mind?
Yeah. And it is okay if they have a learning style. I mean, you can accommodate that to a point. Obviously, you can't completely tailor a whole program around one individual. But as a
Hmm.
trainer, CTO, you I think you get a better outcome and a better experience for both of you if you are flexible, if you are willing to adjust your style to meet the goal. And I think sometimes we forget as CTOs, because a long time I didn't understand this, that is a team effort. You
Yeah.
begin this journey, you're both on this journey together. It is not me teaching the trainee how to do it and they're on their own to learn it. Sometimes it's a mindset of understanding that we are strapped into this roller coaster together, because in training there are ups and downs. There are days where the trainee comes in and they are absolutely killing it, and they go home, they go to sleep, they wake up, and everything they learned the day before is left on the pillow. And they come and they come
That
to
does
work, and you're
happen.
like, yeah, you come to work and you're like, so okay, what happened? Where is the trainee from yesterday? And it's not that they don't care. It's not that they are uninterested. It's not that they're not trying. That's just the roller coaster that is training. It is up and down, it is back and forward. You take 2 steps forward and 5 backwards. That's
Yep.
just the way it goes. And you can't become discouraged when that happens, because especially if you know going in, this is just part of the ride.
Hmm. It'll make that a little bit of a easier pill to swallow when you do see your trainee kind of regress on certain
Hmm.
days and then progress on other days.
Yeah.
So, in regards to like kind of going back to the benchmark, so you have that like introduction phase, and then when they come out there, like the first part of the training is generally just checking that knowledge. Did everything that we filled your head up with in that classroom training, in that very controlled environment, did that stick in your head? We're testing like the knowledge, your knowledge base. Do you know what it is when I say, run a 29 on a suspect? Do you know how to put an address into the computer? And
Hmm.
so, it's important to say, okay, this part of the phase should, generally I've found just in my own personal life that, or I guess professional life, that phase one or the first part of the training, testing the knowledge, generally is pretty successful for the candidates because they would not have generally gotten out onto the floor if they were not able to, demonstrate knowledge of all of those elements.
That's like, I know for us in training here, whether you're dispatching and or taking calls, because they're two disciplines here, separate disciplines here. They're not interchangeable, not yet anyway. Um,
Not yet.
Spoiler alert. Anyway, uh, they they're not interchangeable. So no matter which discipline, we're going to test that knowledge once you get out onto the floor. So like you said, we're wanting to, that's benchmark number one. You've made it through the academy or the classroom or the introduction, if you will. And now you're out on the floor and I'm going to test your knowledge. Do you know what I mean when I say this, that, or the other, or geography even? So for
Hmm.
us, call taking or dispatch, no matter where you are, I think geography is something that they test. And they train you with geography, especially if you happen to be someone who's coming from out of state or from another city. And they I need to make sure you know that we have a street here or a highway here that changes names like what, 7 or 8 times.
Yep. Yep.
That's
It's designed to confuse the outsiders. Yeah.
it, it makes one wonder if that was not literally the goal. Don't you ever wonder sometimes who names? Never mind, I'm getting off track. But yeah, you are testing that knowledge, and so they get out onto the floor, and now the CTO trainer has to know we're starting with that. You cannot grade on execution before we have tested the knowledge to make sure that it's there and fill in the gaps, because coming from classroom and going to the floor is a bit of a culture shock. Yeah, because they get all of this stuff in the classroom and they just pass these tests with 98s and sometimes 100, and they get out onto the floor and they're like, but wait a minute, what happened to my controlled environment? Now I have to think on the fly and apply apply what I learned in my very controlled environment with
Hmm.
the trainers pretending to be the callers and pretending to be the officers, and the script is there, and so there are very few left turns and zigzags in that controlled environment, so it's easy for them to apply that knowledge, right? So when they get into the not at all controlled environment, that is the floor, now it takes them a minute to think. They have to go, okay, wait, here's my situation, here's my circumstance, what piece of knowledge did I get from the classroom applies here? And sometimes you have to wait for them to work it out.
Hmm.
You do. You have to wait for them to work it out or prompt them, because while they knew it 5 minutes ago, the circumstances have changed. The situation has changed. The call is different. Or the traffic stop that was routine 5 minutes ago, now the car's not stopping. Now what?
I do wonder if maybe during like the classroom portion of the training, we should throw like more hostility and curse words at like the call takers, because I think that's
Wow.
one of the things that. Well, I think that's one of the things that really rattles them when they get out onto the actual operations floor, and people are like saying and 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 it's like, whoa, I didn't sign up to be called
Yeah.
and so I wonder if that might help. I just something I was thinking about. But yeah, going back to I guess the topic at hand. Yeah, as you said, you want to set those expectations. So I've got in this first part of training, I'm just checking knowledge. Do I know how to use this map that's got streets on it with 7 different names to confuse the non-locals and sometimes the locals alike.
Ain't that the truth?
And then you move on to other parts of the training, like, okay, now that I know that I can do, like, I know what this is, can I show that I can do this in a very contained way? Can I type on the keyboard? Can I send a call into the computer aided dispatch system? And you're just kind of building on layer after layer, as you said, because you start with a strong foundation of knowledge, and then on top of that, you can build your castle of greatness, we'll say.
Oh, dum dum dum. Well, yeah, because now that I'm thinking about it, because on our DORs or DTRs, because it just depends on where you are listening what they call it, but it's that daily training report or the daily observation report. So for us, I think, what is it, phase one, week one, which is only about a week, maybe two at the absolute maximum. We're just testing the knowledge that we gave you in the classroom, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
phase two, which is, probably week three or so on the floor through week four, or, phase two. Now I want you to demonstrate. Just demonstrate, not execute, because that's different. Demonstrating to me that you can apply the knowledge that you've gained, the first couple of layers. All I'm doing now is making sure that when it comes to the steps of a traffic stop, can you give me the steps and tell me why we do what we do? That's checking the
Mm-hmm.
knowledge and demonstrating and checking for understanding, right? Now, once I've established that through the classroom, phase one, phase two, now for us, and I'm calling it that just because it's just what I know. It will be
Sure.
different for your agency if you're listening. If yours is different, I'm sure it is on some level, but the foundation is, or the crust of it is the same. So for us, by the time you get to, what is it, week four or so on the floor, now we've crossed over, or maybe even five, you've crossed over into what we call phase three, which is the longest part. Now we've given you the knowledge, we've checked the knowledge. I know you can demonstrate to me on the most fundamental level. We put it all together, and now it's time for execution, which is where we put all that together. And now I'm gonna take my chair and I'm gonna slide it back just a little bit, and I'm gonna let you show me, can you execute? And execute is the whole thing. And that takes the longest, because that's where you start building in your repetition, right? You're putting them through the paces. They have to do this over and over and over and over again. And as that happens, eventually what emerges is skill, a learned thing. But that takes time.
Mm-hmm.
That does not happen in weeks, 2 or 3 weeks.
Right. Yeah, and it takes a concerted effort from the trainer to continually be reinforcing the information they've learned in the previous phases or eras of training,
Hmm.
and to be checking with that trainee. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Are you able to take what I've given you and apply it here? And it requires a lot of conversation to really make sure that what you're trying to teach is being understood.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the I guess areas generally that is not focused on as much, is checking kind of that instruction that you've given, like, asking, just maybe straight up asking the trainee, like, what did you hear me say, or what did you understand that I said to you?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And encouraging also when they don't quite get it, or even if you
Hmm.
have reminded them 10 times before and they don't recall it this time, that doesn't mean that they're not learning. It actually means the opposite. It means that they are learning, because there's a lot of information coming at them. They're processing a lot of information. And every transmission or every phone call that they get ups the ante, because now they're having to reach back for uh, knowledge that applies to this situation. So, like I think we were talking last night, setting up and getting ready for this show. You used the example of juggling, and I think it was brilliant.
Hmm.
Can you break that down?
Well, thank you. Yeah, so typically, I would always tell my trainers, like, okay, and the trainees too, like, the first part of it is knowledge, like, this is a ball, what is juggling, just kind of more of a discussion. And then the next part of training, we like that second part would be like, okay, here's a ball. Now I want you to throw it up in the air and toss it between your hands. Okay, now give me the ball. Okay, now here's a cube. Now you do that. And then, like, okay, give me the cube. Now here's a banana. So we're doing one thing at a time. And then
Hmm.
when you get to that third part of training, it's like, okay, here's a ball. Now start tossing it. Okay, now here's a cube. You add that in there too. Okay, keep tossing it. Here's your banana. Okay. So that third part is really like where the rubber meets the road, because you're putting everything you've learned together and operating it all at the same time. And then generally, like, the last part of training is, just kind of discussing your technique and just adding any polishing elements that need to be on there in order to be as successful as possible.
Agreed. And so what and just and I'm got this ball cube banana thing rolling around in my head. I've got the visual now. So
Okay.
what happens when as they're juggling now, right? Because ultimately that is what is happening. And they drop the banana. They drop the banana, but they've still got the cube and the ball. So is it the end of the world that they drop the banana?
No,
No.
no, of course not.
No. What the trainer does in this case is the ball and the cube are still going and they're still, but blast it all, they drop the banana. The goal here, or the role, I think, for the CTO is to reach down, grab the banana, and toss it back into the mix. Not stop the whole thing and say, why did you drop the banana? How dare you drop the banana? Shame on you for dropping the banana.
How dare you drop the banana? You're
I
out of
mean,
here.
you're right though. Am I okay? If we're known for being really completely real and honest and raw with this, but is that not what happens?
Yeah, I mean, that certainly can happen. And I've always, like, as a trainer, I think a lot of people take onto themselves more responsibility than they need to, in terms of, you're not, you know, going to be the one that determines if the employee continues to work there or not. All your job is to do is to try and take their mind and just shove it as full of information and skill as possible, and, help them along the path. So, if they do drop that banana, maybe talk about, like, why the banana got dropped. But you're also there to catch that banana before it hits the ground so it doesn't get bruised.
You know
To
what?
just
I cannot. I'm
really
about
continue
to
this
dance.
metaphor.
I'm about to dance a jig right now because that is so good that you said that the role of the CTO is not to determine whether or not the person stays. It
Hmm.
is it is to teach. And you teach until the bell rings. You teach until you can't teach anymore. And you're right. The role of the CTO is to make sure, if at all possible, that the banana never does hit the ground. It might leave the rotation suddenly because the trainee is, not they're not professional jugglers yet. They're
Hmm.
beginning jugglers. So it's almost expected that one of these is going to leave the rotation. And your job is to catch it before it hits the floor in a perfect world. And if it does
Yeah.
hit the floor, you pick it up, toss it back into the mix, encourage, talk about why, maybe talk about why the rhythm was off or whatever. And I know we're beating this thing to death, but it is absolutely true because not every training program is the same. So everybody can relate to jugglers. And everybody can form a picture in their head of a cube, a ball, and a banana going around in a circle from hand to hand, and the goal being nothing hitting the floor. And what is the person's job that's teaching this skill is to A, make sure that none of them hit the floor, you catch it before it does. And if it does leave the rotation, you grab it, you toss it back in, and you continue to teach and building on those skills so that the next time, if the rhythm is off somehow, they catch it. And you praise when that happens. You don't berate.
Your goal as a CTO, as a trainer, is not necessarily to make small versions of you, as, like, we were kind of talking about at the beginning. You
The
want to
mini
take,
me maker. That's what I call it.
yeah,
The mini me maker. What's that guy's name? What is it? The spy that shagged me. Oh,
Austin Powers,
that one. And that doctor with the bald head and the other little person with the bald head.
Dr. Evil, and Mini Me.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. That. That's not our goal. Our goal is not to create another us. It's to create someone who can do what we do in their own way while still staying within the guardrails that are SOPs for our agencies. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, yeah. And, ultimately, I think kind of as we were talking about in terms of like giving benchmarks to the employee and to yourself to understand what you're training to and what you're looking for and what expectations are going to be really good tools for you as a CTO to use in order to know what you're trying to achieve, not only in that week of training, that day of training, that hour of training. Because sometimes,
Yes.
you've got to take it minute by minute because, as you said, things can get really, really real and really frustrating. So knowing what you're trying to get to at that moment will help you as a trainer know where you're trying to lead the trainee and to help them understand what they need to do. Are they trying to identify what a banana is, or are they trying to throw it around in a circle with the cube and the ball?
Yeah. And having those small bite-sized chunks or those attainable goals, achievable goals, and realistic expectations keeps you, the CTO, from becoming frustrated because your you've adjusted your expectations, so you're not looking for gold medal in week 1, 2, 3, 4, or wherever you are in the training. If your expectation is realistic, your goals are attainable, you don't end up with a discouraged trainee who quits or shuts down or feels as if you are no longer in their corner, because that's so much of it. Them knowing that you are in their corner, and for you to stay in their corner and stay upbeat as much as possible, right? And I'm not talking about smiling like an idiot. I mean realistic cheerleading and encouragement. It's hard for you to stay there if you're looking for what is impossible for them to achieve in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be frustrated, and that's going to equal both of you frustrated. And now the learning has stopped because neither of you is in the mindset to either learn or teach, because your benchmark is either too high or too far out for where you actually are in the training. Yeah, that was a mouthful. Okay.
No, it's all good. But speaking of that, I think we've probably run out of time. I know you and I really tend to get long-winded when it comes to training because it's something we're both very passionate about.
That's true. That's true.
But I think it was a good discussion today.
I agree. And that's all these are. They're discussions. They are designed to get the conversation started. And you're right. This is an absolute passion of mine, and I can go for another hour easily.
Thank you all for joining our discussion today, and we appreciate any questions or topics that you'd like to hear about. Please feel free to email us at lifeline911podcast@gmail.com. From everyone at Lifeline 911 Podcast, I'm Gary.
America.
And we will see you next week. Thank you for watching our production of Lifeline 911 Podcast. If you have any questions about the topics we discussed today, or if there's something specific you'd like us to cover in a future episode, send us your questions at lifeline911podcast@gmail.com. Stay safe out there. Until next time, this is Lifeline 911 signing off.